Kitsap Literary Artists and Writers and the monthly author showcase. I'm your host, Mark Miller. Today we have author Eric Little visiting us here at the Bremerton Kitsap Access Television Studios. Eric is a wine steward by day and a science fiction writer by night. Welcome to our broadcast of Kitsap Literary Artists and Writers.
Thank you. It's my pleasure.
I know how I come up with some of my ideas because I'm a little bit warped. How do you come up with some of your ideas?
Well, I've been reading science fiction for over 5 decades. And in the beginning, I loved Robert Heinlein and Hemingway, which have similar prose. And then I discovered, by the time I was in my late teens, that there's 2 basic kinds of science fiction authors. Ones that tell beautiful stories and ones that tell stories beautifully. So Roger Zelazny, his prose was beautiful. He'd drag in the action once in a while, but absolutely stunning. Jack Chalker, mass quantities of really beautiful stories, not quite so polished all the time. But so I'm trying to do a little bit of both, to have good action, but also to have a simplistic style. And
well, Zelazny also dealt and dug into a lot of various cultures and stuff like that.
Absolutely.
That was kind of his, I guess, bailiwick, or what everybody came to know him for. Was he went into these cultures of everything, and then you developed a whole alternate, almost mythology about some of this stuff. Tell us about what you write about and your stories, and kind of compare and contrast to, like you said, Heinlein and some of the greats and stuff like that.
Well, I have 2 series. The first one is the Summer War Cycle. It's of 4 books. 4th hasn't been written yet.
Oh, okay.
First is out, 2nd is in editing, 3rd is in rewrite, so I expect those out this year. It's basically the story of a former guerrilla fighter who has turned rancher. And he's a pretty brave guy, so he decides to ranch this very dangerous alien critter. He accidentally kicks it into the next step of evolution. And it becomes a threat that could wipe out all life in the galaxy, really. And so, well, at least big enough to eat. And it's the story of how they discover this, how it comes about, and how they come to terms with the war.
I had an idea for and this kind of goes to the audience out there. It's true science fiction writers, we like to create whole cultures, right?
Exactly.
And we like to create whole worlds.
Yes.
And whole universes. Okay. So all of us have like a similar story like that, where you create a creature and then you want to kind of twist it into something that we know and everything.
I think I get a kick out of portraying the society I see around me, maybe exaggerate a little bit in the face of an alien. In this series, I have 3 main cultures. The first one is basically a no-holds-barred mafia that's modeled after the Mexico City Tepito neighborhood and the bad guys. And I had a lot of contact with that culture growing up.
Well, I'll have to ask you that.
The second culture is an immensely old and wealthy AI named Auntie Dow, who decided many years ago that nobody cared about the poor, so she decided she would. And what she did is she started creating these environments called the Hive. She took the broken, the drug addicts, the incurable alcoholics, and brought them in and rehabbed them and put an implant in their brain so that she's always there. In the Hive, there is no child abuse, there's no mean jokes, there's nothing bad, because she's always right there guiding you.
But there's no real freedom.
Exactly. I'm seeing people trade away their freedom today for security. And it's a decision everyone has to make for themselves, but that's what that's all about. And then, of course, my guy goes into all the cultures and deals with them differently. He was raised for a while by Auntie Dow, so he has those skills and that sense of community. But it's pretty fun.
No, it sounds interesting. I went online and read some of the stuff, and you do have a lot of connection with, like you said, the interface between human and AI and machines, and also intelligent machines.
Yes.
Because you've got on the beginning of Summerlight, I think it is, you talk about a sled which is, explain what the sled was. Was Katie the Sled, I think the name of it?
Katie the Sledge.
Sledge.
So,
yeah.
Katie the Sledge started off life as a intelligent machine's companion, a bunny rabbit. And
okay.
basically a mechanical bunny rabbit that was smart and was this AI's good friend as she went out into the world and the chaos and the crime and all that.
Right.
And eventually, when she meets up with my protagonist, Cohen, they decide to let her evolve into a full AI, and she becomes a young lady by the name of Katie the Sledge. And Katie the Sledge is an amazing creature, but she's new to the world, new to a lot of stuff.
Oh,
and when you spent your first years as a bunny, that kind of affects you
it
too.
kind of affects you. But she's used as a transport for warriors.
Well, she likes to wear war trains. So the concept is this: she's an AI, but she can transfer herself between different things.
Oh. Okay.
So one day she'll wear a pretty girl as a suit of clothes, and the next day she'll wear a war train. And she likes to transport people, but she also loves to play music loud and go really fast.
There you go.
So,
and for the people out there that aren't big science fiction fanatics like we are, AI stands for artificial intelligence.
yes.
And everything. So you right now work in Paulsbo
Yes.
as a wine steward.
Yes.
Okay. What does that encompass?
Well, I've been doing it over 30 years. I've been a wine judge for 10 years. I've been in wholesale and retail. So basically, I ask the right questions to help people find the wine that they want that night to go with that food. I mean, I don't sit around and say, this is a great wine, you should get it. I tell people, what do you like? Maybe you'd like this. It's fun. It's also pays the bills.
How do you kind of work that into your writing? Because if you look at old sci-fi series like a Star Trek, they always have some special type of drink that somebody develops and stuff like that. So how do you work that into?
Well, I extrapolated some of my favorite wineries, like Bilcart-Simon Rosé Champagne has now become Dynasty Bilcart-Simon, and they live on a planet colony that's devoted to making champagne. And when I use the descriptors, I'm precise about flavor descriptors
Right.
and aromas, because that's part of what I do. So I had to go back and edit a bit out so it didn't become too much on the wine.
But that's fascinating, because I went to, years ago, we were sitting there talking about this in a little writing group, and it was the idea of, somebody put out the fact is, I want more smells. Okay, so some people, they like that idea of like horrible smells, nice smells, depending upon the situation. So by you utilizing the smell of like wine and stuff, to me that would be fascinating. Is, you know, like you said, getting into the story.
There are a lot more smells that are accurate and a lot more flavor descriptors in my books than in most people, I think. And that's just because it's part of who I am. I notice these things.
But see, that adds to the texture of the book. So that's going to make it different in science fiction, because you are looking at smell. Some people like the touch, tactile senses, smell, sight, hearing, and all this other stuff. And you try to work that in, but you've got an advantage because you actually do that as part of your job. Yeah. So you probably have a lot better vocabulary than I have when it comes to...
It's a precise vocabulary. I mean, if you talk to a carpenter, I mean, there's a hammer to me, but he's got 19 hammers that all have a specific use. It's the same with wine descriptors. We use words like vegetables and minerals and fruit that a person in sub-Saharan Africa would recognize and a person in Rhone, France would recognize. You know, everybody knows what a banana tastes like.
Yeah.
So, thank you.
Well, let me ask you a question, because this is something, pick your brain again. I'm trying to write another book based on one of my series, and part of it does happen on a plant where they discover this new berry that has this unique flavor. And so the discussion, the short little discussion is about, well, what you just made, is that really a liquor? Is it a wine? Is it a scotch? Is it a bourbon? So if you were going to write something along those lines, how would you differentiate between the various drinks if it was going to be a newly developed drink in an alien world?
So the way most of these start out is by fermentation with yeast, and it heats up the sugar in the fruit and turns into a wine or a cider or a beer.
Right.
But if you distill that beer, wine, or liquor, then it becomes a grain-neutral spirit or a unaged brandy or whatever you've used to begin with. And there's specific names for where it was derived from in the distillation process. Distillation in America started when corn harvests were really big and there wasn't much transportation,
right.
and they couldn't get their corn before it spoiled. So they found that by distilling corn into bourbon, they were able to condense those massive quantities into barrels that could be shipped and sold for quite a bit of money. And I can imagine your berries being the same.
In this story, there's unfortunately a extreme side effect that I'm not going to go into.
Yeah.
Start writing the book.
No spoilers.
Yeah, no spoilers. But it's that whole idea, like you said, alien world, alien molecules, slightly changes because, yeah, we have supposedly the same physical laws of the universe is all through our universe. But I always start thinking, well, what about that little twist? And so you've explained kind of a little twist you've done in your books.
Well, I have a lot of bows to my favorite dead science fiction authors.
Okay.
And in one scene in the second book, which hasn't been released yet, Roger Zelazny, in his first book, Nine Princes in Amber, had this guy that, wonderful protagonist. He starts out with amnesia and he finds his way to the throne. But early in the book, he gets destroyed. He builds an army to go take the head back.
Yeah.
Well, I made my character's introduction to being the general of that army in that book, and he trained the troops, and he really liked Prince Corwin.
Yeah.
But it starts when the fight falls away and Corwin gets captured. But this guy's story begins there, and he gets away, and then eventually becomes the guy that you read about here.
You've got authors who write, even when they write fiction, they write the here and now, or maybe they write the near past. Some people do write real historical distant past. We have one individual who's a member of Kitsap Literary Artists and Writers who writes historical biblical fiction. Yeah. And so he purposely goes into some of the more lesser known characters of the Bible and then does as much research as he can and then writes interesting stories about them, which I find is fascinating.
I love that.
Yeah, all of a sudden you go, what? Who's that? Oh, yeah, that's right. This is in that book, yeah. But then he expands it. So you kind of taken a character that most people probably wouldn't have even remembered.
Exactly.
And you turned it into a continuing story and then, like you said, spun it and put your own mark on it in reference to culture.
And it's just a brief scene, but he was one of my favorite authors.
Yeah.
There's a Jack Chalker analogy.
Oh, okay.
Which is, he has a series called The Four Lords of the Diamond. Well, my guy gets a continental-sized section of this planet that he eventually discovers and starts to ranch, and it has 4 forts. So I have the 4 forts of the diamond.
Oh, okay.
Instead of, and they're named after the 4 books or the 4
cool.
planets of his. But if you haven't read that, and that's okay.
It's just something today, like you've mentioned,
Yes.
the hive mentality of I'll give my freedom up for security and stuff like that. How did you wind up deciding to get into writing?
It seems like I've always written, but when I was young, I was very easily distracted, usually by girls, and I never finished any of the novels I started. Then, many years later, I started writing wine columns for Inform Magazine and Grapevine, and then I got together with a chef and we did a food and wine pairing book, and
cool.
I found that I'd matured, and I continued to do that kind of thing, and then one day I thought, I love reading science fiction. Wouldn't it be fun to write a story that I'd like to read? And I look out there, there's so many formulaic ones, so many people that follow the same pattern over and over, and I thought I could do better.
I'm I'm now going to bash a well-known writer for that reason. And I used to be a really big Stephen King fan.
Yes.
For about the last, I'd say 10 or 15 years, I can map out all of his characters, because he now uses the same basic characters in every single book, because he's kind of trying to tell a variation of the same basic stories. He always has the anti-hero that used to work for the government, the good cop, the bad cop, you know, the evil mayor or a government official and all this other stuff. And then he always winds them in, but they wind up after a while all sounding the same. And yes, he's world famous, and he's going to probably make a lot more money than I ever do. But now he's got his son writing with him, and hopefully that's going to break that little bit of new blood out of that mold. And I think that's the problem that every writer has, and to see if you agree with this, that it's easy to get wrapped up in, like you said, just telling the same story over and over and over again.
Well, there are good sides to being older.
Yeah.
And one of them is, I'm not going to run out of ideas, I don't think, before I kick the bucket.
There you go.
But can't blame them for doing what's successful over and over. But I find that I want to do what hasn't been done, or what's just been touched, or hasn't been done as well as I think it could be done.
Right.
And that's where I have fun. Like, for instance, my planet, it's called Summer.
Oh, there you go.
It's a planetary-sized geode, and on the ends that's been broken apart and then put back together, and it has a light source. So inside are 17-mile-long crystals, which my people hollow out like giant terrariums and plant ecosystems.
Okay.
And I never read anything like that before, but I'm having fun.
And so you purposely looked at a geode-type world for the reason of its originality then?
I looked at the geode on my desk,
Aha.
and I started thinking, wouldn't it be cool? I wonder what it would be like to be inside a closed one. Well, you need light, and before I knew it, I was writing about it.
And that, people out there in the audience, is exactly how science fiction writers work.
Yeah.
We'll be looking at something, and all of a sudden our brain goes off in this someplace, and then we start writing something weird, and you guys either like it or you hate it.
Yeah.
What would you tell somebody out there who's watching this show that goes, well, I'm thinking of writing, but I don't know how to get it started, or da-da-da, you know, in other words, they're having all these thoughts. What would you, a piece of advice you'd give them?
I don't remember how old I was when I wrote my first science fiction story, but it died early because I got caught up trying to come up with the right name for my protagonist. And eventually I never finished. My suggestion is start writing, write every day, and if you don't like what you're writing, that's okay. If you can't think of what to write, just start writing anything, because it's the flow is what you want to build, and the ability to let this go down your hand into your keyboard. Keep writing. Write every day. I've never had a blockage, but I write every day.
How were you able to publish your books?
Verita Publishing is my publisher.
Okay.
And it's not one of these big publishers
Right.
with a hierarchy and a corporate image. It's a group of different writers and artists who are helping each other do everything from editing to artwork to everything, and then we market them together. It's not easy marketing these days, as you know. All the old tried and true ways of doing things no longer exist, and the elephant in the corner called Amazon is a really big elephant.
Yeah.
But many writers are still successful in doing these. I did read something interesting the other day, and that was about, someone did a study about authors that were famous for a short time, and they had, you know, massive distributions through the big boys. 5 years later, they were averaging $25,000 a year,
Right.
after making maybe $1 million.
Right.
And I don't think that kind of thing lasts forever. So my idea is to be successful is to gain a fan base, people that like what I'm writing, and keep them happy.
And that's, if you look, like you said, you mentioned Amazon. If you look on Amazon, there are some people, they literally started out writing short stories to develop a fan base. And then later on, those short stories, so they become a novel, you know, like you said, to develop the fan base. It was Rita or Orita, the name of your...
Oh, Varida, V-A-R-I-D-A.
Varida, okay. So where would you be able to say that it's based at? Or is there already
Well,
a base?
Suzanne Hagelin is the president and owner.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
and
we
you know
Suzanne.
her, and she lives in Woodinville, which
Right.
is lucky for me.
Right.
And she does a really good job. She insists on high quality, which is good for me, but
Yeah.
not always fun.
Yeah, I know.
And that's why it's taking so long to get my editing done, because we're all working together.
They provide the editing, though.
Yes.
So it's not run like a vanity press.
No, it's not.
Okay. So you give them money up front, and the problem with vanity presses is there's no guarantee they're going to do anything for you after they get the money. And unfortunately, there's some mainstream old-style publishers that are now creating subgroups of the publishing empire doing just that because they want money up front. Because they figure, well, look, we've got this small stable of well-known authors over here that we can always go back and have them write something new and we'll make some money off them. Or we'll keep selling their old books because, like you said, they developed a fan base. But now we're going to go out there and start grabbing these people in and say, you know, hey, we'll publish you. So I talked to a couple of these, and I'm not going to mention their names so I don't get sued. But their attitude was, I said, okay, fine. You're this huge traditional publisher, but yet you want me to give you money like you're a vanity press. So what do I get out of it?
Exactly.
Well, you get our good name. And I says, what guarantee that once you get the money, you're going to actually put forth the same effort that you do for your big name author that you're making money off of? Well, it's our good name. And that's their answer to everything.
Yeah.
Which means they have no guarantee. They want the Benjamins. And that probably frustrates you as much as it does me.
It does. I decided to check out Kindle Unlimited on Amazon.
Right.
And there's like 2 or 3 million books when I was in there. And
Right.
I would start books and then discard them. So many were unedited. And I applaud the people that got their work out there
Right.
and wrote a story, but unedited. And editing makes such a difference in
Yeah.
readability,
Yeah.
in cohesion, in coherence. So I still found a couple authors that I follow now, but it doesn't work for me.
Yeah. Do you use any AI editing
No.
programs?
No.
You don't? Okay.
No, I live on a small island near Port Townsend.
Oh,
There's no
okay.
internet.
Oh,
I don't
that
even
sucks.
have a good spell check.
No. Oh, geez, that sucks.
I go into town to the library to do that. But
I
no.
did, because I go with Blue Forge Press, she's a local publisher. She's also film and a bunch of other stuff under Blue Forge Group. And so she does my editing now. An excellent editor now that I'm working with. However, I purchased Grammarly, and no, I don't have any stock in it. But there are some of these programs out there, and she's even told me, she says, since you got Grammarly, and you go back and Grammarly helps you keep going back and re-edit, they don't have to do much editing anymore. So she's telling everybody, just get Grammarly, as long as you've got a decent writing style, of course. That wipes out most of the line editing and some of the content editing, because Grammarly will actually help you with content. I really want to thank you, and I'm probably going to try to have you come back again, because we need to talk about some more about your books, because I am a big science fiction fanatic, and I love to get as many science fiction authors in here to talk about the creative process, because I think science fiction adds a little bit to that creative process and everything.
I'm flattered. Thank you.
Yeah.
I would love to be back here.
And also, you should need to bring some of if you got a wine book still floating around out there, you need to bring that in.
do.
We'll discuss the wine books, because
That would be fun, too.
So we're definitely look forward to you also showing up at our Kitsap Literary Artists and
Yes.
Writers meetings, and you said you would and everything.
Thank you again very much. I'm
Well,
flattered.
thank you very much for being here.
It's been real fun.
Yep. And I would like to thank all of our viewers for tuning into Bremerton Kitsap Access Television and viewing the Kitsap Literary Artists and Writers production. I also wish to thank the BCAT staff on cameras and in the director's chair. I like to thank them every time we do this because without them, we would not exist. Our broadcasts are scheduled for the Saturday evenings at 6 p.m. on Wave Cable, Channel 3, and Comcast Channel 12. You can also view a live stream on the BCAT website at www.bcat.org at 6 p.m. Pacific Daylight Time. Keep in touch with our social media and author web pages to discover where you can meet local authors and writers. We're attending several events across the West Sound this summer, including a Gig Harbor Festival July 20th and 21st, Kitsap Arts and Crafts Fair in Kingston on July 26th, 27th, and 28th, and the Kitsap Fair and Stampede August 21st and 25th. The Bremerton Blackberry Festival, which is going to be, I think, is our 4th year, we're going to be there from the 31st and 2nd, and we're always very successful. Every Saturday in October for Book Month, we'll be at the Kitsap Mall. And all authors that are interested need to contact us. I hope everyone has a pleasant evening and a productive and fascinating week. Until next Saturday, I am Mark Miller with Kitsap Literary Artists and Writers in conjunction with Bremerton Kitsap Access Television. Good day.